All right, this morning I was having a talk with a couple students, and I mentioned that in my humble opinion, what we're going to go over last is probably the hardest thing we've done so far. And the comment back to me was pretty much that's what you say every time we start something new. All right, and that may or may not be true. I don't know. I think that we're going to go over Chapter 6 now, or start to. But I think that once you go over Chapter 7 and 8, you're going to think those two chapters aren't hard at all. 9 and 10 are difficult, and 11 through 14, my guess is most of you will have no problem with. All right. Now, I'm going to try to do this a little bit differently. This morning, I sent you all an email, and it's on the board here on the screen. And I've created 3 programs for you that I'm going to be going over with you right now. So if you would open up that email and unzip what's in it, you'll find there are 3, like I said, programs in here. I think they're called Student 00, Students 101, and Student 02. We're going to go over all of them. And I'm not saying that they will totally make total sense to you, but my hope is that they do. Now, the last one that we'll go over is the one with basically new stuff in it, so to speak. All right. So I'm not going to unzip like I'm having you guys do, because I already have that information here. I can find it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up this project that's Student 00. Now, you may or may not agree with this as we go through this, but virtually everything that's in here, you know. All right? Again, like I said, as we go through it, you may not agree with that as we're going through it, but I think if you take the time to go back to it, okay, that you will agree that we've gone over all the stuff in one form or another. Now, that said, I'm going to go over this entire program. Then when we get done, I'll ask for questions. If there aren't any, we'll go on to the next one, and then the next one. All right? So any questions that you have on here, please ask. All right? You'll notice that I took all these variables that I created up here, and I made them all global. In other words, none of them are defined inside of any routine. Since they're all going to be directly related to main, I made all of them static. All right? And again, if static confuses you, we're going to be getting away from that. All right? But what static means basically is there's one and only one. There's a little more to it than that, but I don't want to get into that because it might be confusing. I don't want to confuse you. So let's look at what these variables are. Just imagine for a second that what I want to do is I want to come in here and let's say that I'm doing some kind of analytic tool. And I want to be able to enter in each one of the names of all 12 people who are in this class. I want to be able to give them a random grade between 0 and 100. And I want to keep track of the highest grade, I want to keep track of the lowest grade, and I want to keep track of the average grade. Does that make sense? All right. Now, what I could do is I could come in here with all 12 of you, and I could have student 1 first name, student 1 last name, student 1 number, grade, etc. And I could do that 12 times. That'd be a lot of variables. But I could do that, and it would work just fine. Well, one thing we learned pretty much early on is that rather than do that, I could just create these and write different routines and call call the routines for each one of the 12 students. Okay? So that's kind of what I'm doing here. Now, in this, I didn't say there had to be 12 students or whatever. All right, but I'm just trying to explain this to you. So this represents a student's first name, a student's last name, a student's number grade, and I'm not doing anything here to verify or validate the number grade, because I am calling a routine that's going to generate a random number between 0 and 100. I'm letting the system generate that number for me. So I'm not doing any validation. Just wanted to bring that up to you. All right. Then 90 and up is an A, 80 and up is a B, etc. That's going to be their letter grade. All right. I'm also going to keep track as I'm doing this of who has the highest grade, not the student, but what the value is of the highest grade. I'm also going to keep track of the value of the lowest grade. So imagine, let's just keep it simple. Let's say that I had 3 students, and the first one got a 70, the next one got a 93, and the next one got a 12. These are just those random numbers. All right. So what I want to do in that variable that's called total points is I want to add these up, and it gives me 175. That's the total points. The total grades, if I've got these, is 3. So if I take 175 and divide it by 3, I get what? It's like 58.3. So that should be the average grade. Does that make sense to everyone? All right. Kind of the same way you do it if there was no computer involved. All right. I wanted to set it up, though, so that I could run it, and maybe I didn't know in advance how many students I had. So what I did in main here was I came in here and I have this Boolean thing that says more students. So I'm going to enter a grade, and I'm going to say, do you want to enter another one? And if I say yes, it'll let me enter another one. And then when I get done, it'll do the same thing and the same thing until I say I don't want to do it anymore. At that time, it'll give me that information that I just showed you. It'll tell me the highest grade, the lowest grade, the average grade. All right? Does all that make sense? Okay. Here's one thing I've never shown you, and I don't know why I didn't. See this thing right here that says console.clear? If you want to clear your screen at any time, you can type in console.clear on a console program. That'll just clear the screen. Sometimes that's nice to do because it makes your output look a little nicer. Or sometimes you want to put in a bunch of input, hit enter, and as soon as you do, then you want the console.clear so your output shows on a screen all by itself. Okay? All right. Then you'll notice, what do I have here? I'm calling 5 routines. Set first name, where I'm just going to read in a first name. Set last name, where I'm just going to read in a last name. Set number grade, where I'm going to have the system automatically generate a number between 0 and 100 for me. And there's a couple other things I'll do. Set letter grade, where again, I'll say if the number grade was greater than or equal to 90, the letter grade's an A. Else, if the number grade is greater than or equal to 80, the number grade's a B, etc. All right? Then I'm going to display for each person their individual statistics. All right? So if you notice this, and I'm going to make this small so you can see all of it, all of this that you see right here on the screen, I realize it's small, but all that is inside of a while loop. So I'm going to keep doing this as long as I want to input more students. All right? And after I input and display something for an individual student, then I'll say, hey, do you want to do this again? And what I put up here is a way of doing that. So it'll say run program again. And it's got a variable called again. That's a read line. And then this right here takes whatever I entered in the lineup above it, and it makes it uppercase. That's all it does. Then I check that first character, and if it's a Y, if it's not a Y, I don't want to go on anymore. Otherwise, I do want to go on. That's it. All right? Since I just did a student, I add 1 to my number of students. Eventually, I don't want to do anymore. So I'll come in there and it says, do you want to do it again? I'll put an N or I'll type in no or whatever. So I'll fall out of this loop, and then I'll do this, which says I want to clear the screen. Then for everybody, regardless of how many students I had, I want to display the highest grade. I want to display the lowest grade. I want to display the average grade. Then I just want to do a read line so my screen doesn't disappear. Does the concept make sense to everyone? Yes? No? All right. So first, let me run it. And maybe it'll make a little more sense after that. I'll put in 3 grades. So, enter first name, Jeff, Scott. The system automatically generated that number for me between 0 and 100. Okay? And it was a 76, which said my grade was a C. All right? So do I want to go again? Yes. All right? So there's my wife. Well, she got a 41, so she got an F. Now, if I did this right now, I'm not going to do it yet. I'm going to put in one more grade. But if I did this right now and I said I didn't want any more, the highest grade should be a 76 because that's what I got. The lowest grade should be a 41 because that's what she got. All right? The average grade should be 76 plus 41, which is what, 117 divided by 2, so like a 58.5. Does all that make sense? In fact, let's try it like that. So I'll say, no, I don't want to do it again. So there was the high grade, there was the low grade, the total number of students, and the average. Does that make sense? So let's take a quick look at how this happened. So the set first name is pretty simple. Enter the first name and a write line. With a read line. Then the enter last name is exactly the same as the set last name is exactly the same as the set first name, except it's asked for the last name instead of the first name. All right? Then we set the number grade. Now there is a couple more things happening in here. This is generating a random number. This is one way of doing it. All right? You may or may not be aware of it. I may or may not have told you this. I don't remember. But in virtually all programming languages, when you generate a random number, what you actually get is you get a number that's greater than or equal to 0 and less than 1. That's what you actually get when you generate a random number. What this is doing is it's saying, I don't want that. All right, I want random.next, so I want you to give me a number that's greater than or equal to 0 and is less than 101. That's what that line of code right there is saying. All right, so that will create that for me. Then, since I just have a new grade, I enter that grade, my total grades. Okay, so I up it by 1. Then I add the total points to number grade. So again, using the example that we just went through, okay, I came through here the first time and I put in Jeff. Then I came through here and put in Scott. Then the system went through here, and right here, it generated for me, okay, a 76 right there. All right? So the total grades was now 1, and the total points was now 76. All right? And it'll check, and that'll become both the high and the low grade because that's the only one that I've entered. Then I run it again. The second time, I'm not going to write this down, but I put in Sandy and Scott, and the second time it came through here, and the number that it generated now was a 41. Well, my total points now was 76 plus 41, or 117, and my total number of grades was now 2. So this was the first run, everything you see here. The second run was this, this, and this. Does that make sense? All right. So then we came through here and we checked all this stuff. You'll notice if you look, I did not have to do it this way. All right. But I made the highest grade, and that really should have been a -1, but -0 works just fine. All right. Notice I made the highest grade the lowest number I could, and the lowest number the highest number I could. And the reason I did that, sometimes people think, no, high grade should be set to 100 and low grade should be set to 0. No, it should be the opposite. I wanted to make sure that the first time I ran this, whatever grade I put in, just the first time, would be both the highest grade and the lowest grade. All right? That's what I wanted to make sure of. Okay, so I did all that stuff, and then I came in here, so there was enter the highest, there was enter the lowest, here was setting the number grade. Then I wanted to check and say, hey, is that a high grade? Okay, well the first time through it is. The first time through it's the highest and the lowest. So the first time through, the high grade, the first time through is 76 and the low grade is 76. The next time through is 41 greater than that? No, so that's still the high grade. Is 41 less than that? Yes. So that's now the low grade. All right, so that's exactly what I'm doing right there. This, I think everybody gets. We've talked about this before. This is simply a series of if statements that come through here and check to see if you got an A, B, C, D, or F. This is just a bunch of right lines that display everything. And then finally, when I fall out of my loop, when I say I don't want to enter any more grades, then I display the highest grade, the lowest grade, and the average grade. And you notice for the average grade, I had to go and cast because I want to put that to 2 decimal places. And if I didn't do that, I would lose any fractional part. All right? And that basically is the program. So what do I want you to get out of this? All right? First, totally fine to have these set up as basically global variables in here. That's okay. Sometimes it's easier to do it that way. Sometimes it's not. Second, it's possible to have both global variables and local variables. All right? Next, setting this up, remember this statement that you see right here. So, sorry if I sound like a broken record, but that's the same thing as saying why more students equal true. All right? That way is just a shortcut for this way. And I've told you before, if this way is easier for you to understand, by all means, do it that way. All right? Okay, then we clear the screen. We input all 3 of these variables. Based on what our number grade was, we set the letter grade. Then we display all of this stuff for that student. All right? Then we ask them, do you want to do this again? And if you do, we allow you to do it again. And if you don't, you're all done. All right? So that's, again, eventually you fall out of here. And as we just mentioned, we clear the screen. Display our highest grade, our lowest grade, and our average grade. Have a read line just so it doesn't go off the screen. Now, that was a lot to throw at you in 15 minutes. And I'm not saying, hey, does that totally make sense? Could you do that now? No, I'm not saying that. But I wanted to show you a way of doing this. All right? So if you have any questions on this one, you can bring them up. And if there are none, I'm going to bring up the next one, which is students 01. So are there any questions on this one? You have the code now. I didn't feel like printing out, 12 copies of each one of these. So I just said the hell with it. And I'm giving you the code. All right. Now I'm going to keep that up there, but I'm just going to start up another session of Visual Studio 2017. And I'm going to do a file, recent projects and solution, and I'm going to bring up students 01. Now the good news is there's not much to say about this. It's almost the same program as the last one. Not quite, but almost. What I did here was I said, you know what? Let's put a while loop in here where we can only read in a certain number of students. In the last one, we used a while loop. And it was, remember that this word, it was from your test, it was an indefinite loop. So in other words, we could have put in as many students as we wanted to. Now I'm using the while loop as a definite loop. So I'm saying while our numbers of students, which we set equal to 0, while it's less than 5, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, we're going to do this 5 times. This is exactly the same. This is exactly the same. Again, what's different is since it's in a definite while loop, okay, it only runs a predetermined number of times. So when you talk about a loop being a definite loop, that means you know exactly how many times you're going to run through it. Now, I didn't do this, but if you look up on the screen here, I'm just going to comment this. I'm going to comment this line out, the first one that we put in. And I could have written this as for And we could have said, for example, int L, oops, not there. I could have said, for example, for num students equals 0, num students less than num studs, which are kind of crummy names, but plus plus num students. And if we had done that, I wouldn't have needed this line down here. So it's just another way of being able to do the same thing. All right? Sometimes I cringe as to whether or not I should even bring this up, because if I show you 1 or 2 or 3 ways of doing it, some people are thinking, yeah, well, now you're really screwing with me. And it's not my intention at all. It's just trying to show you that there are multiple ways we could have accomplished the same goal. That's all. All right? So I'm going to undo that, remove that. So it looks the way that it did before. The point of showing you this is that now, other than the fact that the previous example that I showed you was what's referred to as an indefinite loop, this one is a definite loop. So if I had, instead of 5 students, if I had 55 students, all I'd have to do would be to take that number up there in blue and turn it from a 5 to a 55. That's it. All right. Other than that, it's exactly the same program. All right. It's exactly the same program as the previous one. Any questions on that one? All right. Then I'm going to bring up the third and last program, which was called Students 02, I believe. And again, one of the reasons I decided to give you this, you might say, well, I don't know if I have any questions or not. You're just throwing all this stuff at, then look at it. And if you do have questions, after you look at it, come back and ask. The people, I've been asked in here, how do you learn this faster? How do you learn this better, etc. Whenever you're given an example, either in a book, by me, online, whatever it happens to be, kind of devour it, go through it. And if something doesn't make sense, don't be afraid to ask about it. All right. All right, so here's the last one. And this is Students 02. Now this one is going to look different than the previous ones did. This one uses arrays. And I went a little nuts here just because I wanted to show you the syntax for using arrays, etc., and start to get into that with you. All right? So I'm just going to grab this one for right now as an example. All right? So that line that you see up on the screen right now, if you can imagine what that is going to do is imagine, for example, an apartment complex that has 5 units in it. All right? And it doesn't matter. I know there's more than 5 here. But what it's saying is I want to be able to grab 5 of these units, and I want to be able to put first names in there. They're going to be someplace in memory, and what the system tries to do, and typically it does it almost 100% of the time, is it wants these to be contiguous locations in memory. One right after the other. So imagine that the first family that lives there, their name is Green. The next one is Jones. The next one is Scott. All right, the next one is Wilson. And the last one is Johnson. All right. Then I could really say in here, since I'm calling this, well, I guess I should use the last name, but you get the idea, hopefully. I could say their first name 0 equals Green. First name 1 equals Jones. First name 2 equals Scott. First name 3 equals Wilson. And finally, first name 4 equals Johnson. And the reason I took the time to put all this up was to show you at least one thing, and that is the fact that when you are referencing an array, they start with element 0. The way that you actually typically would read this would be first name sub 0 equal Green, first name sub 1 equal Jones, first name sub 2 equals Scott, first name sub 3 equals Wilson, first name sub 4 equals Johnson. Sub is short for subscript. All right? And just like each one of these, if these were apartment complexes, each one of these has an address. All right? They all have the same address if it's an apartment complex, but one would say apartment 1, apartment 2, etc. We're doing almost the same kind of thing. Now going back and looking at the program, when you want to say something is an array is what's called a data structure. It holds multiple pieces of data. Everything that we've done thus far can only hold one piece of data. That's it. Everything. All the stuff we've done right now, whether it's a string, a number, a Boolean, it can only hold one thing at a time. This variable can now hold 5 things at a time. All right? So can this one, and this one, and this one. The rest that you see here still only hold one variable at a time. Typically, when it holds only one variable at a time like this, it's called, it goes by different names, an elementary data item. It doesn't matter. All right? But this is typically referred to as what's called a data structure. Okay, what is it? It's a holder of a bunch of these put together. Now, if you look at the syntax for this, you have to say the data type. Notice I've got string and int and char. And after the data type, you've got to put in bracket, bracket. Those are not parentheses. Those are brackets. Then you give it a name, and then you say equals new followed by the data type, and then inside how big it's supposed to be. All right? I said it like this because I want to fill this data myself. I want to ask the user to all these questions. What if I knew, all right, and we'll use last name because actually those are last names I put up there. But what if I knew these right here were my last names? Okay? Then what I could say, instead of saying string, bracket, bracket, last name equals new string, like this, which is totally fine, I could have replaced this, and I could have said equals Green, Jones, Scott, wouldn't matter if I put it on another line, Wilson, Johnson. So if I do that, then what I'm doing, if I do that, is rather than setting up an empty array, I'm initializing the array with values. All right? And the reason I'm showing you that is that's what your book is going to show you, is both of those ways of doing it. Other than that, when you look down through here, it looks pretty much the same as what we had before, because it is the same as what was in there before. All right? What you have to realize when you start looking at this, because like I said, if you've never seen an array before, you might think this is just really screwy. Well, what we're going to end up putting in here for each one of these is this. It's a loop control variable. And what it means is, if I'm right here, my loop control variable is 0. If I'm here, my loop control variable is 1. If I'm here, my loop control variable is 2. If I'm here, my loop control variable is 3. If I'm here, my loop control variable is 4. All right? Did I have to do it that way? No. But this is the way that I wrote the program. So you're going to see there are 4 arrays in here. A first name array, a last name array. They're both strings. A number grade array. That's an integer. A letter grade array. That's a char. Each one of them will hold 5 values. All right? So it's the same kind of an operation as we were doing before, but now we're working with arrays. These variables are exactly the same as what we had before. All right? So now when you look in here, notice what I'm doing. Do you notice that each time in there, I'm passing in LCD? What that's saying is the current first name, the current last name, the current number grade, the current letter grade, and display the stats for the current student. That's all LCD is it's a counter that just represents the current one. All right? Then if you notice inside of each one of these, now you might find this to be a little confusing. If I didn't put it in like this, this will now say enter student 1, enter student 2, enter student 3, enter student 4, enter student 5, which I thought made more sense than when you put in the first student. Otherwise it would say enter student 0, which some people might find confusing. All right? So I'm going to run this in a minute, but it's going to say enter student 1 first name. I'll put it in. Then it'll say enter student 2 student 1 last name, and I'll put it in. Then it'll again randomly come in there and generate the grade. Do the same stuff before. Check to see if the current grade is greater than the highest grade, and if it is, change it. Check to see if the current grade is lower than the lowest grade, and if it is, change it. And then set the letter grade accordingly. Print out all my stuff. All right, and then at the end, this is exactly the same. These I didn't have to change a bit. But the idea behind this was to show you a program that did not use arrays and then show you the same program using arrays. That was my intention here. So again, if I come in here and I run this, notice it now says enter student 1 first name. Still gives the same information as before. Now it says enter student 2 first name. All right. Then it says enter student 3 first name. Then it says enter student 4 first name. And finally it says enter student 5 first name, last name. Then when it's done, it gives you the stats. It shows you the high grade, it shows you the low grade, it shows you the number of students and the average number grade. It's the same exact output that we had before. And again, the reason for showing you this and showing it to you like this is so that when we go in here and we start writing a program now, or I should say we're going to do that, but not yet. As we start going through Chapter 6, I wanted it to make more sense to you. You may or may not remember, but we wrote a program in, I don't know if it was Chapter 3, 4, or 5, but one of those where we worked with daily temperatures. Again, I don't know if you remember that program or not. We're going to go back at the end of this chapter and rewrite that program using arrays. All right, so you can go back and look at an existing program and see how it works both with arrays and without arrays. The last thing I want to say about arrays, in this language, not JavaScript from last semester, but in C#, two things. First of all, arrays must all hold the same kind of value. All numbers, all booleans, all strings, all chars, but they must all be the same. Second, after you set up an array and you set up its size, you cannot change its size. How do you change it? You stop the program run You edit the file and change it, and then you run the program again. All right. JavaScript that we talked about last semester was not like that. JavaScript, you could dynamically change the size of an array as the program was running. You cannot do that in here. All right. You won't do it next semester in ASP.NET. You won't do it the following semester in Java. They're both set up like this. All right. All right. And again, take a look at those. If you have questions, please, get back to me and ask, ideally in class. All right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start right now on Chapter 6, and at 8:50 we're going to take a 15-minute break.